This is Stan. I'm a YouTuber from Poland who used to live in Taiwan for 9 years and now making videos on Asian politics. In response to the CCP undermining Hong Kong's democratic system, the US Treasury announced on December 7th the latest sanctions against 14 Chinese officials. The reason for sanctioning these people is related to their role in adopting the national security law for Hong Kong and for Beijing's disqualification last month of the elected opposition legislators in Hong Kong. This time, the US Treasury targets the officials of a higher rank than the two previous sanctions lists. All of them are what is called in China deputy state-level officials, vice chairpersons of the 13th National People's Congress Standing Committee. Here are their names: Cai Dafeng, Hao Jianmi, Chen Zhu, Zhouling Padma, Ding Zhongli, Hao Mingjing, Emir Baki Arkan, Li Bingxuan, Shen Yueyue, Wan Exiang, Wang Chen, Wang Dongming, Wu Weihua, and Zhang Chunqian. The above 14 persons were included in the specially designated nationals list by the Office of the Overseas Assets Control of the US Treasury. According to the US Department of the Treasury website, SDN sanctions include top criminals such as terrorists and international drug lords. The sanctioned persons and their immediate family members will be barred from entering the United States. Their assets will be blocked, and the US nationals are generally prohibited from dealing with them. The sanctioned persons will be prohibited from trading in the United States and won't be able to buy or sell any US-related funds, goods, or services. Commercial and financial institutions such as banks cannot conduct major business transactions with the sanctioned targets. Within 1 month after President Trump signed the Hong Kong Autonomy Act and the related executive orders, the US authorities immediately imposed sanctions on 11 Chinese and Hong Kong officials, including Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam. And currently Carrie Lam can't even use her bank accounts. She has to pay in cash only and keeps a lot of cash at home. But even so, when Carrie Lam agreed to an interview with Hong Kong international business channel HKBIC some time ago, she said she was very honored by those unfair sanctions imposed by the US government. Wow, this reaction is no different from of a villain from some Hollywood movie who takes a great pride of how cruel he or she is. Talking about the sanctions, the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also stated that the Beijing government has continuously undermined Hong Kong's democracy and caused the Hong Kong Legislative Council to exist in name only. The actions of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress of China are dismantling the promised autonomy of Hong Kong. So why does the United States only impose sanctions on the vice chairpersons of the National People's Congress of China this time? And why wasn't the chairman of the Standing Committee sanctioned? Well, let me tell you about the structure of China's National People's Congress. According to the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, Chinese laws need to be passed by the National People's Congress and then signed by the chairman of the state, sometimes called President in English. But the name is used mostly to cater to the Western audiences. 主席 in Mandarin, it means chairman and not president. One of the powers of the National People's Congress is to exercise the establishment of special administrative regions and their systems. This seems a bit abstract. Let me give you an example. In June this year, the National People's Congress passed the national security law for Hong Kong unanimously. Well, actually, this law covers the whole universe and not Hong Kong only. Everyone should still remember this terrifying law, which could affect anyone who opposes the CCP's regime. As long as you support the Hong Kong's democratic movement, whether you're Chinese or not, China will try to persecute you in accordance with this inhumane law. If China followed with their promises on the Hong Kong's autonomy, Hong Kong should have had the power to decide whether to pass the national security law through their legislative council. Therefore, the National People's Congress is simply a tool that allowed the Chinese Communist Party to bypass Hong Kong's legislative council. This also completely violates the Sino-British Joint Declaration signed in 1984. On November 11th this year, the NPC Standing Committee adopted a decision on the qualifications for members of the Hong Kong's Legislative Council, resulting in the immediate disqualification of the 4 pro-democracy legislators. All of these decisions are made through the National People's Congress. Originally, the National People's Congress was just a legislative organ, separate from the party. But after many years of gradual revisions, in January 1975, the first meeting of the 4th National People's Congress was held. The revised Constitution of the People's Republic of China was adopted. It actually stipulated that the National People's Congress is the highest organ of power under the leadership of the Communist Party of China. This is unimaginable in a democratic country. It can be said that then the CCP only increased its firm grip over China. There are currently 2,980 members of the National People's Congress. In order to make it look like a legislature of the democratic country, the CCP establishes different small parties and allows their representatives to join the NPC. But we all know that the Chinese Communist Party actually controls everything. The Standing Committee, the permanent body of the National People's Congress of China, is composed of a chairman, 14 vice chairmen, and a secretary. Even in the constitution of the Chinese Communist Party, which is different from the constitution of the People's Republic of China, it is pointed out that the important party members must serve as the members of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. Since the 14th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, that is, after 1992, the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress was also made a member of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau of the CCP's Central Committee. In reality, it is like that. From the 7 most powerful party members, including Xi Jinping, one is elected as the chairman of the National People's Congress, and currently the chairman is Li Zhanshu. So, by looking at that, we can actually understand that the National People's Congress is an exclusive legislature of the Chinese Communist Party. As Li Zhanshu is the member of the Standing Committee of the Politburo, if the sanctions are directly imposed on him, it can immediately cause turbulence internationally and even trigger the further military provocations by the CCP. The United States is still in the early stage of gradual decoupling from China. The supply chain and military disposition is being adjusted. Therefore, the US is currently showing China a warning sign. And those sanctions against the 14 officials are meant to show that the US is going to stand up against the human rights violations. Last time, such sanctions were imposed on July 9th this year. Those sanctions were imposed by the United States Treasury Department in accordance with the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act. Sanctions and visa restrictions were imposed against Chen Qiangguo and other 4 leaders of Xinjiang's political and legal institutions, and the Xinjiang Public Security Department. Chen Qiangguo is one of the members of the Politburo of the CCP Central Committee, but not one of the Core 7. On December 9th, a member of the National Committee of Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference and also a well-known gang member, Wang Kok-koi, nicknamed Broken Tooth, was also sanctioned under the Global Magnitsky Act for his involvement in drug trafficking, racketeering, human trafficking, illegal gambling, and a range of other criminal activities. I have a feeling that the US is finally agreeing on the fact that the CCP is actually a street gang or a criminal organization. What is also important, the United States started reducing the validity of visas of the CCP members starting December, from 10 years to 1 month. In terms of the size of the Chinese Communist Party, at least 270 million party members and their immediate relatives will be affected by those restrictions. In addition, on October 2nd this year, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, also issued a policy guide emphasizing that all Communist Party members or other totalitarian party members or affiliates who apply for immigration will not be accepted, which means that the requirements of the Immigration Act must be strictly enforced, and it is clearly stipulated that the Communist Party members or any other totalitarian party and related personnel should not obtain citizenship or permanent resident status in the United States. And of course, the CCP protested those sanctions, just like they always do. They also used their giant baby diplomacy and wolf warrior diplomacy methods to scare away Ambassador Branstad, who was previously called a good friend of Chinese people, in October this year. And up until now, there is no US ambassador in China. Therefore, China's Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Zheng Zeguang, could only lodge solemn condemnation and a strong protest to chargé d'affaires up for them, accusing the United States of seriously violating the basic norms of international relations, interfering in China's internal affairs, and undermining Sino-US relations, which is outrageous, unreasonable, and bad in nature. The Chinese side expressed the solemn protest and strong condemnation in regards to those sanctions. And China's spokesperson Hua Chunying didn't want to miss such an affair and added her own point that China strongly urges the United States to immediately revoke their wrong decision, stop interfering in China's internal affairs, and not go further and further down the dangerous and wrong road. Strongly urged the United States to lift sanctions and also threatened the US with reciprocal countermeasures countermeasures. It seems that the US Treasury Department sanctions don't have any educational effect on the CCP. The CCP authorities also imposed reciprocal sanctions on US executive officials, congressional personnel, non-governmental organization personnel, and their immediate family members who performed badly on Hong Kong-related issues. At the same time, the CCP also decided to cancel the visa-free travel for temporary visits to Hong Kong and Macau for the US diplomatic passport holders. In fact, many are speculating if the deterioration of the relations like this continues, will there be a day of the official break of the diplomatic relations between the US and China? Regarding this, I still look at the beginning of this new Cold War in a more conservative way. According to past historical experience, even if the relationships between the countries drop down to the freezing point, the possibility of maintaining diplomatic relations and retaining dialogue is very important, especially when we're talking about China, a totalitarian country with its own nuclear weapons. Currently, we're facing the new era. No matter if we're talking about propaganda methods, warfare, supply chains, anything. The present situation cannot be viewed completely in the framework of the past. To win against the CCP, we should use our democracy, freedom of speech, academic freedom. These are our strongest weapons. In addition, in order to maintain communication channels, the US would not break diplomatic ties with China. Nor did it break the diplomatic ties with the USSR during the Cold War. This is also the safest practice for the United States. But the sanctions would deepen, and the economy would be completely decoupled from China one day. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please press like, subscribe, and share. This is Stan, and I see you in the next one. Bye bye.